Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Officers Association webinar, in which we'll be shining a spotlight on the increasing opportunities in the fast-growing rail infrastructure sector. My name is Clive Lowe. I'm a career consultant with the Officers Association, and in today's webinar, we're going to be looking at the rail infrastructure sector, what it means for the economy and opportunities for military and ex-military people, the types of roles available, the skills, qualifications and experience needed, and also the supply chain, the major supplier organizations who support the industry. We're delighted to welcome tonight our subject matter expert, who's Chris Ackerman. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I've served previously 18 years in the Army and sort of moving my way through to the rank of Major in the Royal Engineers. Left nearly 2 years ago now, so February 2014. Served in the most sort of common sort of tours and areas, starting off in Kosovo, moving through to Iraq, and then a bit of time in Afghanistan as well. My background from about sort of 10 years before leaving sort of began to become more and more focused on infrastructure engineering, and in Royal Engineers went through the sort of chartered engineer course and MSc in construction engineering, and that sort of led me to an initial job in engineering consultancy after leaving the Army, and then joining the Network Rail team in July 2015. As a program manager within the infrastructure projects team in the East Midlands. So really the last sort of 7 or 8 years of my career, having a couple of years in Australia and the sort of tutorship and mentorship of a large rail construction company, working towards my chartership, then sort of led to further infrastructure opportunities and experiences. And sort of culminating with a squadron command in the Royal Engineers in a sports squadron, doing sort of various infrastructure jobs in the Middle East and the Falklands, and in the UK, supporting the Olympics as well. And now my portfolio in Network Rail is sort of circa £500 million. That includes the enabling works and the works that we're beginning to now take on for the electrification of the Midland Main Line team, the Midland Main Line as well.
Okay, Chris, well, welcome to the webinar, and thank you for the introduction. So the first question I'd like to pose to the participants is, which major rail infrastructure delivery program has already commenced? Is it A, HS2, B, the Electric Spine Midlands Main Line and Transpennine, C, the Great Western Line electrification, and D, Crossrail? It's looking 13% say HS2A, 20% B, the Electric Spine, 27% Great Western electrification, and our figures are wrong. We've got 73% Crossrail. That can't be right. Chris, any comments on that?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. The numbers coming through there. I don't know if it's possible that perhaps some people chose more than one option. Clive, would that potentially be the case?
No, it's not possible on the system. But I think it's a good basis to looking. I mean, Crossrail seems to be the predominant choice.
No, what I was going to say is it's quite interesting because really, you know, to one degree or another, they have all started and commenced. So the sort of challenge we've got broadly across the rail infrastructure sector is that for the last, I'll come on to shortly in the next slide, there's been a sort of a period of perhaps decline in rail infrastructure, and now all of a sudden the government has commissioned and committed to fund a number of schemes, all of which to some degree or another there's going to be a considerable amount of crossover. So it's interesting that the sort of answers that came back, sort of almost really reflect that, really, that to one degree or another that they're all sort of happening and have been initiated. I think of those, Great Western and Crossrail are the most mature. with HS2 in the early stages, and the electric spine, the Midlands Main Line and TransPennine being remobilised after a governmental pause. So sort of moving on from that, I just wanted to sort of really share some further points to hopefully highlight that background, and hopefully that will sort of be demonstrated with regards to where we are in the rail infrastructure sector. So as you can see there, Claire Perry MP, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Department for Transport, sort of said in an address not too long ago, 3 or 4 months back in June, that we basically have 5 years to get it right after successive governments have failed really to invest in rail infrastructure for one reason or another. By 2010, Britain were ranked 33rd in the world, behind Chile, Namibia, and Tunisia, which probably again was quite a sort of startling fact that I was able to sort of dig out. And again, Claire Perry MP sort of mentioned in her address. Over £70 billion will be invested in rail, in general transport infrastructure in the next 5 years, and a good proportion of that is for rail. So whilst I've put there £12 billion is being identified for rail infrastructure for CP5, which is our control period, which we're currently in 2014 to 2019, but that doesn't include HS2. So when you include HS2 on top of that as well, we're getting into the sort of region of £30 billion up until 2019. So really, it shows that hopefully, as pointed out there, it's a great time to be in the rail infrastructure as a professional. It's a growth industry, and it's going to continue to grow. And to sort of feed that demand, we are having to look at how we advertise for recruitment. And from my previous experience in the military, and in all engineers, chartered engineer, know that it's a very, very capable and enigmatic sort of set of people that we would want to begin to work with more and more going forwards.
Chris, we've had a couple of questions, if I can ask them. The first is, what sort of backgrounds are you looking for? I think that will probably come up in the second question, but what sort of backgrounds of people are you looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just flicked on to the next question slide there. So I think rather than sort of answer that now, we'll bear through the presentation and we'll come on to that naturally. I think anyway, Clive.
Good. The other question then is again, it's slightly not quite in the right direction, but anyway, how do you foresee the future use of diesel rolling stock? An interesting question.
Wow, that's an interesting and insightful question, because it's something we discuss quite a lot actually, and it's interesting because the current plan for electrification relies on the rolling stock being able to be run by both electrical generation, overhead line electrification, OLE, as well as diesel, because clearly it's not very sensible if you're electrifying a line in stages that you get to the end of the line and then the train stops because the overhead electrification has run out. So we're relying on the industry and the Department for Transport and the Office of Rail Regulation to work with industry to come up with that particular solution and what the rolling stock will be, and it will have to be a hybrid diesel and electrical running type train setup to enable us to take the benefit advantage of the infrastructure that we're developing.
Okay, Chris, thanks for that. Shall we go on to question 2 then, which I think answers the first questioner's points. Question 2 is, what skills and experience do you think are transferable into this sector? So that does, in effect, cover what sort of people you would be looking for. Is it leadership and management skills, project management background, logistics, or engineering background? What we're seeing is that predominantly participants are selecting leadership and management and project management, roughly speaking, equal. And then the background in either logistics or engineering also figures, but slightly less so. But primarily, Chris, leadership and management skills and project management skills are what the audience believes or considers.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Clive. So I think dominantly the answer with regards to leadership and project management is correct. Although there is at this particular time a growing recognition and acknowledgement that what we are as an industry, and probably not just rail, but transport and industry more widely and generally are short of engineers. So I'll come on to that in a little bit. But previously, from my previous experience, the predominant skills that I rely on a day-to-day basis are leadership and management. And really, with leadership, I sort of tend to focus on those aspects that provide a sort of a guidance and a way forward in difficult sometimes circumstances when I'm dealing with, maybe it might be contractors, it might be with local councils, it might be with drawing groups of people together to identify ways forward or options for ways forward. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be technical solutions. A lot of that is sort of synthesizing the various pieces of information and principles that people are discussing, and then sort of just reiterating it in a way that makes sense. And then really once that there's a sort of clearer sense of the way in which problems might be tackled, and people that need to come together in order to achieve that. It really leads on to the second point there, which is then having the drive and the tenacity and the sense of purpose to see that through. And you know, the military officer background is very good, I think, at sort of engendering those skills. It sort of takes really from the military estimate perspective, essentially takes you through a number of stages in which you're continuing to refine those options for taking through complex situations and coming up with a number of options and then making some sort of judgment, and we'd call that sort of the commander's decision in the estimate process. But really what that is then is taking a view on those people that you're actually interfacing with to then take forward and drive it forward. And really in doing that, it's questioning the uncertain and getting clarity at every aspect, because what people generally are good at is throwing in a whole load of sort of means and ways of going about things, because in talking and in conducting meetings, people generally tend to feel that they're doing something purposeful, so they feel that they're being useful by doing that. But actually what happens is it's just throwing in more uncertainty all of the time, and people can begin to lose their way very easily. So a large part of my job is sort of taking stock of situations, questioning the uncertain, because quite often even sort of what people would phrase themselves as experts actually tend not to be experts, and they're just sort of offering various views to sort of make it sound like perhaps they know a bit more than they actually do, and trying to make sense of all of those situations. I think the challenging and potentially dangerous industry sort of aspect there is something that I wanted to again highlight, because whilst clearly is not the kinetic environment that would perhaps potentially be used to working in the military in terms of actually sort of the explosive environment, the rail industry itself is a very hazardous situation and environment to work in. Only today was I've been beneath a bridge inspecting it whilst 115 miles an hour trains were rattling over the top, and working parties were continuing at either end of a large viaduct bridge, and that doesn't happen without a great degree of sensible planning or discussion, safety management, ensuring that everyone is absolutely crystal clear on the way in which the work is to progress. So again, in all of those situations, there's a healthy mix, I think, there of the sort of the drivers that drove me in my military career. The ability to lead people, to synthesize the key aspects, to get a sense of purpose and drive those forward, to question the uncertain and to provide clarity at every stage where possible, and within a sort of potentially dangerous industry, again, swap out the sort of the more military aspects for the rail aspects, but it's still fundamentally a sort of dangerous industry to work in if we don't get it right. So safety first is very much a guiding principle by which we work to. In terms of experience and qualifications in demand, so we've sort of really tackled, I guess, the leadership and the project management sort of side of it. There is a shortage of engineers at the moment, and we are looking for chartered engineers in mechanical, electrical, civil, and structural. However, I'd put that sort of equal with project managers as well. So whilst I've ordered those in bullets 1 and 2, really they're equal, because we can't draw and bring everything together without the leadership and the management of good project managers beneath that. So they really sort of go hand in hand to enable a wider organisation that works effectively and productively. We're also looking for planners. That's a large part of what we do, making sense of a large complex program and working with the project managers and engineers to actually put that into a plan that it has been consulted, that is understood, that makes sense, and also has contingency in for when aspects of the entire sort of delivery process doesn't go as well as perhaps sometimes it should do. So I think that's another aspect from the military perspective in terms of contingency planning that really sort of would help the rail industry sector as well. Logisticians is a large part of what we do. From a network rail perspective, we probably wouldn't be looking as much into the logistics, but our contractors certainly do. We work on a collaborative framework approach, and the whole of network rail really does now. That's the sort of the way in which the policy has swung recently, and all of our contractors look for those logisticians that can enable an effective sort of organisation that works and delivers sort of a value for money through efficient logistics, and our contractors are also looking for that. Those first three sort of sets of people as well, the engineers, project managers, and planners as well. The risk and value management, I think it probably goes without saying that risk management is a fundamental sort of aspect and principle and guiding principle in what we did in the military, and those people that we are looking for as well. And accreditation of those underlying qualifications to the sort of relevant bodies, recognised bodies, helps very much as well. So that might be from sort of Prince 2 and Association of Project Managers up to being an incorporated or chartered engineer, planner, or project manager. So very important whilst you're beginning your transition sort of journey to look at how you can become perhaps accredited to one of those recognised bodies.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. A couple of questions. One is geographic. What part of the country are the main rail sector opportunities? Many of service leavers establish a geographic base, partly tied on where they purchased a home, but also where children go to school. So tying that into what is going on in the rail infrastructure world, what are the main areas that people should be considering?
I think broadly at the moment there's 3 or 4 areas. I think I'll sort of selfishly start with our area first, the Midlands area. So Derby, Birmingham are locations, and as far north as Sheffield, and south, probably as far south as Corby, are the extent of the line in which we're currently planning to electrify. So all of those areas. If I was to focus on one of those areas, and I don't live there myself, but sometimes think that would have been a good choice. I think Birmingham, or possibly Derby, again because you've got HS2, which is going to be coming through those areas, as well as the Midland Main Line electrification. In the south, anywhere around the Swindon area generally tends to be a good location, because a lot of the Great Western electrification is based out of Swindon. But equally, London itself is a hub for all of our consultants and Network Rail itself as well. And then going northwards up to Manchester is where a lot of the Network Rail and consultants organisations are basing themselves for the electrification of the east to west Transpennine route, which will go broadly from Manchester across to York. So there's quite a sort of large and diverse area there. I think the Midlands is generally a good area because we've got HS2, as I said, and the Midlands mainline electrification. But the Great Western electrification is also set to go for a few more years yet. And to the north, there's a lot of electrification work going on as well. So I think any of those areas are good areas to focus on.
Good, thank you. Another question. And it does relate to the longevity of employment to a certain extent. Infrastructure projects take a long time, but do you have a feel for how long, if somebody joined Network Rail or one of the suppliers, would that time career, or is it, are the employers tending towards permanent or, if you like, contract employment for taking on people?
I think my personal preference is to have a balance, but we recognise we need a core team of people that we want to bring into the rail infrastructure sector and sort of really look after their career for them and provide them a viable career path from sort of middle project management or engineering type levels all the way up to senior program management. And beyond that as well. The work itself, so taking the middle of main line, we've got funding now through to 2023. HS2 goes through broadly for phase 1 through to 2026, so that's a whole decade there. The electrification of the Transpennine route, I think, is a sort of 7 or 8 year scheme. So we're looking at sort of schemes that are at least a decade in terms of the initial designing and planning and then delivery. And I think whilst all that's going on, there's going to continue to be a focus on rail and the government wanting to look for other schemes to continue to improve the rail network as well. So I think the next decade looks exceptionally healthy. And again, that's a good thing, clearly, for us, but also it's a risk because we need to really build up the professionals within the rail infrastructure area, because it's been, as per the previous slide, it's been an area that perhaps has been neglected by successive governments. So it's a risk and it's an opportunity. I think with regards to the contractor side of it, we do rely on contractors quite heavily. They tend to do the work itself and deliver. We have consultants that work with us. The one thing I would say about the consultant contractor side is that generally, you know, when making decisions about staffing, we tend to obviously clearly want to look after our core professional staff, and the contractors are there just to do that. They sort of fill in the gaps, help us with specialist areas, but fundamentally it's sort of the core permanent staff that we'll always look to protect and grow as a professional body.
So there is a form of career planning within the, if you like, the supply chain managing these projects, so that someone who may join with just a bit of military project management skills may go on to get a professional qualification whilst employed with one of the organisations involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a really good example of that, actually. We've got a chap called Troy Lancaster who came across from the Royal Engineers before I joined Network Rail, so a couple of years ago now. He's joined as a scheme project manager. He's now doing an MSc in project management, and that's been funded by Network Rail. And I'd fully expect him to promote through to project manager and beyond in the next couple of years. And he took that step sort of after 8 years as this, and has made a really good name for himself in the area that I work in. Yeah, is a full viable career all the way up to senior management there. If people wish to sort of make it their sort of their main purpose, and that's what drives them career-wise.
Great. I've got a couple other questions, Chris, but I'll keep them to the end, I think. Shall we go on to question 3 then? Question 3 is for the participants. What sorts of organizations are involved in delivery of the rail infrastructure project? A, government. B, operating companies. C, engineering consultancies. And D, suppliers. Okay, thank you very much. Let's close there. 50% are saying the operating companies, about 25% of you selected government, and then 15 and 10% for engineering and suppliers. So a spread across all 4 of those areas. Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that probably reflects sort of the reality. The government has a hand, and I say the government. Network Rail is now a public body, so we're effectively an arm of the government, and we have a lot of involvement early on, and actually as projects progress, that sort of diminishes to a degree. Once the funding's agreed, the designs have been tendered through the framework contracts. It tends to sort of then go out to the suppliers themselves. The operating companies are very much involved in that early stage of stakeholder engagement. We have to make sure that the train and freight operating companies are fully appraised and consulted with regards to our plans, because ultimately they're our future customers. So the infrastructure is there to support their requirements in a growing rail demand era, in which the use of rail has, I wouldn't want to quote numbers, but I think generally the use of rail has risen by something like 70% in the last decade. So it's very important that we look after our operating companies and their needs and requirements. And then engineering consultancies are very, very much involved at the front end. We make sure that we continue to take on the points of contractors through early contractor engagement and making sure that designs are buildable. All the various means in which we deliver our work is discussed and talked through in a very large degree with the contractors to make sure that everything is deliverable, and we can do it in the way in which we're envisaging the work to be done. Now, suppliers are clearly a very big mix and an important part of that, whether that be procurement of materials or whether that's a part of the supply chain, subcontractors, specialist subcontractors, electrification, groundworks, bridge construction, whether that's track, signal, and associated infrastructure. So there's a very wide and diverse part of the organisation that is sort of starts off at the governmental level and then sort of begins to filter and cascade throughout the rest of those organisations. So the next slide really shows that. I think what I've tried to do is to show how from an early stage, from an early delivery stage, that it begins at the strategic level. So it sort of really starts with an idea in terms of a requirement, which is clearly then analysed at a high strategic level through the Secretary of State. It begins to work its way through operationally in terms of how that would impact and the benefits that would be imparted upon the population. The Department of Transport begins to get involved, and rail operating companies. And then we're sort of then hitting the procurement and tactical sort of aspects of that, where we're actually looking, and it transfers over to Network Rail to begin the delivery of that. And as we discussed before, there's a whole raft of organisations that begin to become involved with that, and we have to make sure we're talking to particularly key stakeholders like councils and landowners. HS2 is a good example there, where there's having to be compulsory land acquisitions to make sure that the actual overall scheme is successful. Some of that is not as sort of as popular as clearly it could be. So early stakeholder engagement is exceptionally important in everything we do. I think there are sort of key considerations there in terms of access rights, where we always struggle with ensuring that our means of getting on and delivering the work is absolutely as tight and as considered and planned as it could be. public presentations. Again, it really sort of comes back to the sort of leadership aspects, and the military background, military officer background really lends itself to public speaking and being able to represent the organisation's views clearly and in an unbiased manner as possible, whilst clearly sometimes taking sort of some challenging and difficult questions and really sort of spinning them in as positive and constructive way as possible. We deal very much with the press and local interest. We have several projects where there's a keen interest. So we have a new station, for example, we're building at the moment, or we'll begin to be building next year at Ilkeston, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, sorry. And that involves the Secretary of State for Transport himself, Patrick McLaughlin, his constituencies next door. So he's very keen on making sure that particular project, whilst it's not one of our biggest value projects, it's sort of in terms of its importance, the very highly important projects that we get right. So yeah, a whole sort of range there of organisations, and I think for me, what I enjoy about that is that there's so much variety there to sort of begin to be considered from the various earliest stages all the way through the various levels of delivery, and that's something that again probably resonates with military career. The number of stakeholders that we're continually sort of working with, particularly on operations, to ensure that what we're delivering in terms of benefits is to the population's requirement and to the where the money comes from. The client and the stakeholders are all as sort of bought in and bought into the journey and riding along that journey with us as fully and as committedly as possible from the earliest outset stages.
Okay, Chris, thanks for that. We've had a few questions in, and I think what I'll do is combine the questions on this section with the questions at the end of the webinar. So just a few quick ones. What are the typical entry points for junior officer roles? And is Network Rail, for example, offering a program for service leaders, or is this a direct entry type of role?
So broadly speaking, I've done quite a bit of thinking about this. We have our sort of three stages really of project management. We have a project manager assistant, which is a band 5 job, a scheme project manager, which is band 4, and a full project manager, which is a band 3, and then the program management, which is the level I'm at, band 2 and above. So broadly speaking, the scheme project manager is in terms of I suppose the practical considerations of the skills that are required is probably the entry level point for a military officer coming in as a captain. The sort of overall compensation packages are comparable, and it provides that first rung of the ladder to enable people to begin working up the further skills to then sort of hopefully promote to project manager and beyond from there. There isn't a package or an overall means of bringing on a number of military people and training them up. But what we do offer is a bespoke set of training courses, and the Network Rail also funds various schemes of MSCs, as I mentioned. Troy Lancaster was a captain in the Royal Engineers and is doing his MSc with Network Rail funding that. So there's a whole raft of ways forward in which people can sort of get in at the initial entry level and then really decide which of a number of ways that they can sort of take their career forward from there.
Do you have any organisations that you know of who are pushing to hire ex-service personnel? And who's the major player, for example, in the consultancies or contracting areas?
Yeah, we're working with our framework. So our framework is in terms of we have 4 contractors on our framework, and the framework as a whole can only be as good as the people within the overall framework, and not just Network Rail. And I'm always very, very sort of keen to point that out to our contractors, and actually I don't really need to point it out because they understand that. We have quite a bit of military experience in Carillion, which is probably the largest, or is the largest contractor on our framework. We have an ex-Royal Engineer, Lieutenant Colonel, who heads up their logistic division, a chap called Phil Crick. The slightly smaller contractors, Gallagher Try, Murphy's and AMCO on our framework are all very interested in meeting sort of ex-military officer types and finding entry vacancies for them in their organisations as well. And within Network Rail itself, probably not entry-level jobs, but then there's a whole load of raft of other jobs that's in terms of sponsorship and the higher-level sort of policy jobs that could then begin to become open to people as they sort of make their way through the organisation as well. So yes, our contractors are very interested. That they like the skill, the range of skills and talents that military officers bring, their flexibility and the speed at which they can resolve problems and work to provide solutions. So they're very keen to interface. And on the 26th of November next week at the Symposium that's being run by the Officers Association, all members of our contractors will be represented in that forum. So I think that shows the commitment that they're putting into this initiative as well.
Oh, brilliant. The Officers Association Symposium is in Deloitte's head offices in London on Thursday the 26th of this month. It's advertised on the OA website if you want to find out more about it. Chris, another question then. Is there you mentioned in your answer to question 3, compulsory purchase, so it's dealing with landowners, dealing with access rights, keeping those open so you can actually get the job done, things like dealing with public presentations. Is there a demand for people with soft skills, such as negotiation or stakeholder management? Are there opportunities for people in their 50s, for example, and what sort of skills might the contractors or the consultants be looking for in these areas?
Yeah, I think there are. It's an interesting one because it's something I thought about recently. The whole sort of stakeholder piece and managing sort of challenging sometimes stakeholders does provide perhaps an area where more experienced and perhaps people that have seen those challenges a number of times before. So people in their 50s and so forth. It's generally an established sort of entry into the rail market at the sort of project manager and engineer level. But there's I think there's a dialogue to be had there with regards to those types of roles, because it's always the project manager that has to deal with those challenging circumstances, but the project managers have a whole load of other issues on their plate at any one time. We in Network Rail, we have a team, consensus and environment that will be expanding, and they tend to deal with the landowners. Network Rail have a property section that deal with the land and the acquisition and leasing land for access. So that is another avenue. And I think the contractors would be open to that dialogue. I think if the right sort of candidates came along and can be sort of make themselves available to be met, then I think that there's potential opportunities there.
Great. Oh, thank you very much. Well, look, Chris, that's brilliant. I won't take any more questions, but I just wonder whether you'd summarise what has been covered and learnt today for us.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So I think I've hopefully made it clear about the opportunity with regards to investment in rail infrastructure over the next decade. The money is committed by government, and they have a very now I suppose real challenge in delivering that. And that challenge provides us the opportunity. It provides opportunity for a second career in an area that's dynamic, and it's a high risk if it's not managed appropriately. And there's a number of interfaces and points at which ex-military or military officers looking to transition will undoubtedly add value in providing guidance and leadership and sort of driving projects forward in terms of delivery. What I would say in terms of experience, the earlier that people begin to formalise their experience with accreditation, the better. Whether that's on the engineering side of it or on project management, very much an advantage if there's an acknowledged body that people are accredited to. And I think that the next bullet there about the opportunities growing across all levels, from strategic to tactical, that the rail industry is getting larger, and with that expansion, that there will become more and more opportunities. So the earlier on that people are entering into the rail industry, the greater those opportunities will be there for them. Whether that's in network rail, then perhaps over the duration of a career, it's not necessarily not necessary to stay in one organisation. People can sort of go to contractors and consultants on the rail sector to grow other aspects of their sort of profile and CV, and look as a whole to grow within the rail infrastructure organisation. Clearly, that's very transferable to all the wider areas of building construction and infrastructure, whether that be sort of highways or nuclear power station construction, which is beginning to become something that the government is getting more and more concerned about. And I think whilst the government sort of acknowledges the importance of growing the country through general infrastructure construction, then I think that's something that we can all take advantage of and add a lot of value into the industry as we do so. So really, I think that's probably hopefully a sort of summary of where we've been tonight.
That's fantastic, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. It's very much appreciated. For the participants, Chris gave a talk at a project management seminar in Leeds at the end of September, and again will be giving a short presentation at the OA Symposium next Thursday, a week today. But any other events that are taking place where Network Rail or others in that framework agreement are participating in events will appear on the OA website. A couple of you asked questions. Can Chris be found on LinkedIn? Do you want to answer that, Chris?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I've already seen my LinkedIn sort of buzzing away here. I've got about three invites waiting for me to respond to. That's absolutely fine, and by all means, get in contact. And I'm quite happy actually, Clive, for my email to be shared as well. If I'm not quite sure how you go about that, but either way through LinkedIn or my email can be shared. What I would say is as we begin to advertise for roles, we haven't got quite to the stage where we're advertising, but we're not far away. It'll either be hoping before Christmas, but definitely very early in the new year. And in fact, there are current roles that are being advertised. So what I'll do is I'll point people in the right direction with posts on LinkedIn or through the Officers Association in terms of what they should be looking out for.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. So we'll close the webinar there. So thank you all very much. Chris, we're enormously grateful to you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week at the OA Symposium at Deloitte's offices in London.